I think from what I picked up, what you were saying there, Sam, is that perhaps you said you went to a rough school and perhaps you might have been subject to a bit of maybe some social discrimination, perhaps.
Yeah.
Obviously,
a lot of racism was involved at the time.
So it was sort of, I guess, the fact that you were perhaps it was socially motivated, that you felt that you could, felt that you probably came off the receiving end of a couple of hidings when you were a bit younger, and then did that gave you the motivation to get into fighting?
I was a smaller, younger fella too. Probably one of the smallest in the class, and of course there's probably not many ethnic students in the class, and so like back in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, that was like a big thing going on. I think more accepted now, the cultures, but it was a bit tougher back then.
Yeah, it was very tough back then. I grew up in Melbourne, so I grew up in Melbourne, and I know exactly what you're talking about. And I moved to Africa. I've lived in Africa for about 25 years, which is where I got to meet this great guy. But what was really interesting, I think, and seeing the nuances between Australia and Africa, is that it doesn't only exist in Australia. It doesn't only exist in Australia. Even within Africa itself, you have what we call insular racism. So you have tribal issues. You have, for instance, chaps Ghana, for instance, is made up of many regions, and so you have tribal influence, and so you'll have say the Ga versus the Ashanti versus the Northerner, and it's really racially charged out there. You find that hard to believe, because you think of Africa as just being an African country, or Ghana or Ivory Coast or whatever.
It's interesting you bring that up, because Australia, it's renowned as the one of the freedom countries where just life's a lot easier than many other countries in the world.
So diverse.
Yeah.
So diverse.
And but in saying that, when I tell the stories when I'm overseas, and thanks to boxing, we've got to travel the world, all over Europe and all over the US and wherever, everywhere, and been able to do many speaking engagements and talks about how tough it was living in Australia as a young ethnic kid, and it was that change in my life that brought me to being a world champion, and be able to give back and talk to kids and teenagers about the situations that I've been in, and that I wasn't fed to the golden spoon to become world champion. I had to do it tough in many ways, and the sacrifices and everything that's needed to equal success didn't just come from just a bit of advice from friends or from family. It came from my sport of boxing, and so that's why one thing I hold special to my sport is that it's able to do that, because in boxing you have to be dieting right. You can't be drinking and partying. You can't be on drugs. You can't be on any of these things to be a champion. So it set me the right way.